Welcome, everyone, to the November Knoxville, Knox County Planning Agenda Review Meeting. I'm Tim Hill, the chair, and along with me is Amy Brooks, director, and our counselor, Tasha Blakeney. We have a lengthy agenda today, so I would suggest that we try to get through this as best we can and maybe leave some discussion for Thursday, if you may. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Director Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be brief in my remarks given the length of our agenda, but I did want to let you all know I'm really excited to announce that the county does have a signed contract with a consultant company to assist us with development of the county's first unified development ordinance. So we'll be working with Inspire Placemaking Collective over the next 2 years to create that ordinance. They are working additionally with a local firm, Cannon & Cannon, and they'll have legal review assistance from Ben Mullins, and then we will also utilize a third-party legal team to help review the final draft. So again, really excited about that. We'll have a kickoff meeting within the next couple of weeks, and that kickoff meeting will be an internal kickoff meeting. It will be with our planning staff as well as engineering and public works, and the consultant team will be refining what that timeline looks like. And after this meeting, I will send you all a copy of their scope of work. I really want you all to be engaged throughout the process. So once we have that schedule refined with them, we hope to provide you all with monthly updates during your agenda reviews, and then we'll have some special sessions just for you all to dive in. So if you have any questions after you receive that scope of work, please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions or talk further about the project. Quick update about our transportation planning staff. They've wrapped up their second round of community input for the mobility plan. The mobility plan is it's a regional plan, regional transportation plan. They've held meetings in Knoxville and Blount County. They've had virtual meetings, and then their next step is going to be to revise or refine their draft transportation project list, and they're working on an interactive map. And so once that is ready, I'll send it out to you all for additional feedback. You all should have also received a link to a survey. So if you haven't already taken that, please take a few minutes. It's not very long. It'll help with that public input component of this. And with that, I just want to make a quick announcement about KGIS. So KGIS is not updating our most recent changes to our planning, to the cases that we have. So if you're going to look, we hope to have that fixed either later today or first thing tomorrow, but everything should be accurate on our planning website. So if you're looking at cases, please go to our website, go to the commission page, and that's where you should get all the most recent information. If you have any trouble with that, just reach out. We'll direct you. Okay. So with that, we will jump into our review of agenda items. We're going to start off with agenda item number 5, which is an ordinance amendment, and I'll turn over to Ms. Hillman.
So this is 8E23OA. This ordinance amendment to the landscape article, Article 12, was presented by Mr. Bentley Marlowe in August of last year, along with several other amendments aimed at expanding middle housing options prior to the adoption of the middle housing article we now have. This particular amendment was completely revised in response to suggestions from a planning commissioner. Staff had originally recommended denial of the final amendment in the context of this broader middle housing conversation, because the middle housing assessment had not identified landscaping as a barrier to middle housing, but also the city tree board was actively working on updates to the same article in collaboration with city administration. This effort is ongoing, and it involves engagement with landscape architects, arborists, developers, and green policy advocates. This item was tabled November of last year and is being heard now. Before getting into the details of the updated staff recommendation, staff do want to express concern about this precedent of a single individual submitting ordinance amendments without meaningfully engaging stakeholders, the general public, or the staff responsible for enforcing the code. Responding to ad hoc legislative revisions submitted by one constituent that affect the entire city can compromise the integrity of the zoning ordinance and undermine public trust in the amendment process. Applicants are encouraged to contact plans review or planning staff or their council representative to discuss perceived issues going forward to establish a more publicly engaged amendment process. Planning worked with plans review and inspections to review each amendment and arrive at the staff recommendation. Of the 6 amendments proposed, staff recommend approval of 1, which eliminates the requirement in Table 12.2 for a residential use in a non-residential district to install a buffer yard when abutting a residential district. Staff recommends the denial of the remainder. The first amendment adds an exemption for landscaping requirements so that only developments exceeding 10,000 square feet of disturbed area are required to provide a landscape plan. This application of the term disturbed area is drawn from the hillside protection article of the zoning ordinance, and it's also a stormwater engineering term. It does not currently exist in the landscape article and is not relevant to the issue of landscaping perimeters around parking lots and buffering between land uses. This next proposal removes the requirement that a plant list be provided as part of the, did I skip one? Yes. This proposal removes the requirement that a plant list be provided as part of the permitting process for residential developments below that 10,000 square foot disturbance threshold. However, it does require that a plant list be kept on site after installation for inspection approval. Requiring a plant list only after permitting is contradictory and confusing, and it would be challenging to enforce compliance. This amendment to the buffer yard provision adds a note that a walking path can take up no more than 30% of a Class A buffer yard and 25% of a Class B buffer yard width. This reduction for a walking path contradicts the definition of a buffer yard, which is intended to separate one use from another or shield or block noise, light, or other nuisances. A walking path does not accomplish this. This amendment increases how much a buffer yard can be reduced if there is a wall or solid fence. Planning's assessment is that increasing the incentive to build walls in place of landscaping and minimizing landscaping overall contradicts several of the purpose statements of the landscape article, which include creating a desirable and functional open space environment, establishing a natural environment that provides numerous benefits, including reducing surface runoff, promoting biodiversity, and reducing the urban heat island effect, among others. This amendment identifies an issue where, for example, a single-family residential development in a light commercial zone would be required to install a buffer yard between another single-family development in a residential zone. The primary intent of a buffer yard is to shield different tangible land uses, and requiring a buffer yard, even in instances when those land uses are identical because they have different zones, does not seem necessary. It should be specific to the use on the ground and not the abstract legislative zoning. If this amendment is approved, per staff recommendation, staff had also suggested removing the reference to zoning districts in the purpose statement for a buffer yard. However, this recommendation will be removed and blue sheeted after this meeting since there are other relevant references to zoning districts in this section of the article, specifically the next one. This last amendment removes the requirement for a buffer yard for multifamily parking lots abutting the less intensive residential zones if it is serving fewer than 5 dwelling units and a fence or wall is installed. Planning objects to this incentive to replace landscaping with walls for the same reasons cited before, in that it conflicts with the purpose statement for the landscape article. I'm happy to answer any questions on these.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hillman. We'll move on to agenda item number 15.
This applicant is requesting a rezoning from RN2 to RN4 on a 5,500 square foot lot near the Western Heights community. It is in the middle of the block on Emerald Ave, and it's surrounded by RN2 zoning and the traditional neighborhood residential land use classification. And just a note, I've reduced these slides to just 2 just to get through cases more quickly. So if you want to see something on KGIS, please let me know. Staff are recommending denial of the proposed amendment because it does not align with the intent of the zoning ordinance. While there are changing conditions in the area that support more residential intensity with the ongoing transforming Western Heights developments, more residential development is already achievable here through the middle housing standards, which would permit a duplex, triplex, or fourplex on this lot according to the dimensional standards. This lot is already non-conforming with its current RN2 zoning because it doesn't meet the 50-foot minimum lot width requirements. Continuing to upzone lots that are already non-conforming with their existing district could lead to a manipulation of Article 17.3, which allows non-conforming lots of record to be used for any use permitted within that zoning district. A key difference between RN2 and RN4 is that RN4 permits more than one principal use. So approval of the requested RN4 district paired with the middle housing standards could result in development that's far more intensive than its surrounding context. Happy to answer any questions.
And keep going. Number 44.
Okay, 11I 24RZ, this request is to rezone an 11.68 acre parcel on Tazewell Pike from RB, general residential, to PR up to 10 dwelling units per acre. This property's access to Tazewell Pike is near an unsignalized intersection to the northeast where Bellarive Ave and Clearbrook Drive meet Tazewell Pike, and it is a high conflict intersection. The subject property has steep undisturbed slopes in the center of the site, and there are potential sinkholes as well as what appear to be streams running through the property, one near the entry of Tazewell Pike and one near the steep slopes in the center of the property. This area has seen a relatively rapid transition in land use and population growth with residential development, which has resulted in significant traffic congestion on Tazewell Pike, which is a two-lane minor arterial street without shoulders in this area. Crash data provided by AASHTO, which is shown here, reflects 80 crashes within a 1/3 mile radius of the subject property over the past 9 years. The RB zone permits up to 12 dwelling units per acre by right, but it would be a challenging zone to execute on a lot with so many environmental constraints. The PR zone would benefit a future developer in its flexibility and the general public for their ability to review development plans. We recommend a reduced maximum density from 10 to 5 dwelling units per acre, considering transportation safety issues at this location. Happy to answer any questions.
You can move on to 46.
11K 24RZ, this applicant is requesting to rezone from agricultural to planned residential with a density of up to 9 dwelling units per acre on an almost 20-acre parcel on Bradley Lake Lane. This is southeast of Shad Road and Amherst Elementary School. There are changing conditions that do support consideration of the PR zone. Shad Road is a major ongoing capital improvement that significantly addresses transportation conditions in this area. There is also a trend of residential development surrounding the subject property, including ongoing development of the Spring Lake Farms subdivision to the north and the recent completion of the Oakley subdivision to the southwest. Staff recommend a reduced density from 9 to 6 dwelling units per acre, which would slightly surpass existing density that surrounds it. This density and a recommended condition are tied to access issues with regards to this site. Bradley Lake Lane is a 12-foot wide, unstriped local street. It has been expanded and improved from the entrance of the new Spring Lake Farm subdivision up to Amherst Road. And you can kind of see it in this, where that entrance is in the northwest corner of that picture on the bottom. You can see where it's been expanded at the entrance of that subdivision. Staff recommend a condition that the portion of this road between Spring Lake Farm and future development on the subject property be improved in the same way. Even beyond Bradley Lake Lane, this property does not have a direct connection to Shad Road and has to meander some relatively narrow streets to get to that main thoroughfare. For these reasons, we recommend 6 dwelling units per acre. Okay. So item number 48, 11N 24RZ.
Sorry, Jesse, do you have a question?
Yeah, was this property, did it come before us recently? Or recently as in the past couple years? previous 40. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 48.
I don't think there's any prior zoning history on this one.
Has 48 come before us? That might be the one, one of the ones you were just on, the map looked familiar, and I think I had clicked on this one. Is this 48? Okay.
Yes,
Is
this
this what you're about to talk about?
Yes.
I'm so sorry, I jumped the
That's
gun.
So this is a rezoning and plan amendment request for a 3.5-acre property to go from agricultural zoning to the suburban, with a suburban residential place type to highway commercial zoning with a corridor commercial place type. The property is located near but disconnected from an existing commercial node at the intersection of West Governor John Sevier Highway and Maryville Pike. It is surrounded by residential and agricultural land uses. Staff are recommending denial of this request because it is incompatible with surrounding development and infrastructure conditions. There is an established corridor mixed-use and rural crossroads commercial node to the west, which has vacant or undeveloped property. So adding a disconnected spot of commercial zoning conflicts with the Comprehensive Plan's Implementation Policy 3 to incentivize and encourage infill and redevelopment of underutilized commercial land. No capital improvements are currently planned to occur at this site to support a more intensive and auto-centric rezoning. Highway commercial zoning at this location could result in adverse impacts to traffic safety. Eastbound traffic from the highway turning right onto Crenshaw Drive must make almost a U-turn, and it's likely that vehicles enter the opposite lane. The subject property's driveway onto Crenshaw Drive is also at a steeply sloped angle where sight distance in both directions is limited. It's also worth noting that this rezoning request stemmed from a code violation citation due to an unpermitted RV park that's operating there. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you. We'll turn over to Ms. Porche to talk about agenda item number 30. Okay, thank you. This is final plat 11SA24F, number 30 on the agenda. It's a re-subdivision of the property of Jerry Wood Jr., and the variance is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum width from the access easement from 25 feet to 10 feet. So you can see here, this is how the subdivision or how the property currently lays out. So there's the one property that they are proposing to subdivide, and it's accessed. Here's the easement here that serves these 4 properties here, and then there are 2 houses currently on this property. So they are proposing, this actually is a cemetery, so it's really house, so 4 properties and 4 dwellings. And this is how they are subdividing it here, just adding a new lot line. So under the first hardship criteria, the applicant has listed a hill on the site as being the reason why they cannot widen the easement. So there's a difference between the pavement width and the easement width. The existing pavement is 10 feet wide. The easement width would be 25 feet wide. Typically, easement width is to allow for utility lines or anticipating some sort of widening or something like that that may need to occur. In this instance, it's private and it only serves 4 lots. There's no anticipation of utilities being laid here. There's no need to widen it for any future development at this time. So it did not meet the hill. The first criteria by way of the hill, as you can see here, it's fairly flat. The contour lines are 2 feet apart. So there is a hill, but it's very slight. And so our initial recommendation was to recommend denial just based on the fact that because of the topography, that alone wasn't enough. Because it's not the pavement width we're talking about, the driving surface, it's just the easement on paper that we're talking about. However, when you look at the structures that are on their property, you can see a structure right here just outside the driveway.
And so just to familiarize you all with that first criteria hardship that we're talking about, it's 1.05A2A in the subdivision regulations, and it states, because of the particular surroundings, shape, or topographical conditions of the specific property involved, a particular hardship to the owner would result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were adhered to. And so initially, when we were looking at that, we were looking at shape and topographical conditions, but that structure could meet the particular surroundings of the site. And so looking at this as an aerial, sort of a bird's eye view, this is probably a little bit better. You can see how close that structure is to the driveway. And so if they, if the variance is to leave the easement as is due to the structure. We feel like because that structure has been in place since 2015, 16, that was under a previous owner, not the current owner, so it's not a self-created hardship. And we do feel like that does meet the particular surroundings. And so because they're not adding an additional dwelling to the easement, because there's already four, it's the same four dwellings being accessed by the easement, it's just creating another lot so that this house could have its own lot. So recognizing that, we are recommending approval instead of denial. So we have revised the staff report. You guys will be receiving that in your Thursday packet with the blue sheets. So we just wanted to let you all know the reason for the change in our recommendation. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Porche. Now we're going to move on to Mr. Hawk. Maybe take a minute for him to get hooked up. And you all can ask questions. Our staff are prepared to be brief in their remarks, so if you do have questions, please feel free to ask. Start off with agenda 19.
So this is a duplex subdivision in the RN1 zone with 6 lots within the Norwood neighborhood. The property is little over 8 acres. The proposal includes 2 different duplex design for different lots, one for lot 1, 2, and 3, which are on the eastern side, and then lot 4 and 5 are on the western side. Staff recommends approval of the concept plan, which does not include any variance or alternative design standard request. We recommend denial of the special use request because the property does not meet the location criteria of the one-year plan, which are stated in page 29 to 30. For example, while the property has frontage along a minor collector road, Wilkerson Road, it is accessed from a local street, Monterey Road. It is also not in a transitional area between residential and non-residential use. It is not an area having a gross density over 5 dwelling units per acre, and it's not part of a planned residential development. Happy to answer any questions or explore the case further on KGIS.
Okay, seeing no questions, we'll move on to agenda item number 42.
So this A to RA rezoning request along Pheasant Creek Way, for which we're recommending denial. The place type of this property is suburban residential, and it's within the planned growth area. The property is little over 1 acre. Our reason for denial includes several items. So the property is one of the 10 properties accessed by Pheasant Creek Way, a gravel road with a maximum width of 9 feet. The access road, which is a joint permanent access easement or JPE, and the properties accessed by this easement has remained unchanged over the years. On the image below, you can see the parcels which has the Pheasant Creek Way address. There are 10 parcels with this street name. The RA zone would allow subdivision of this parcel, adding another property to be accessed by this JPE. The subdivision regulations allow the creation of additional lots on a previously approved JPE under the condition that the JPE would be required to meet the standards of a private right-of-way. However, the width of this JPE is not sufficient to meet those standards, so it would create nonconformity with the subdivision regulations. The rezoning is also inconsistent with several sections of the comprehensive plan, including criteria 2A of the Appendix H. The appropriateness of rezoning requests shall be determined based upon availability of public facilities and services to the subject site. It's also inconsistent with Action 9.3, which recommends focusing growth in areas already served by adequate infrastructure, and Action 9.5, which discourages isolated development where infrastructure is inadequate or not yet planned.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to agenda item number 50, which is Ms. Warner.
So this is for a rezoning and plan amendment, the south side of High School Road, across from the intersection with Rayworth Trail. The rezoning is just for 1.5 acres from RA to CN, neighborhood commercial. And the plan amendment is for the entire 18 acres, the entire parcel, from suburban residential to suburban mixed residential. The recommendation is to deny both the plan amendment and rezoning. The SMR place type does not meet its criteria for plan amendment. The requested SMR and SR place types are very similar, as they contain similar development patterns. They allow consideration of the PR zone up to 12 dwelling units an acre. The main difference between the two place types is that the SMR allows some less intense commercial uses, and SR does not. East Emory Road is a little over a mile south and is a established commercial corridor in this area. Additional commercial zoning is not warranted here and contradicts implementation policy 4 of the comprehensive plan, which calls for commercial development to be in walkable areas. This area doesn't have any sidewalks. Also recommending denial of the neighborhood commercial zone because the location is inconsistent with the intent of the CN zone. This zone is intended to provide for reoccurring shopping and personal service needs of nearby residential areas, and development should be compatible with the character of adjacent neighborhood. The zoning should generally be placed at street intersections that include either a collector or an arterial street, as close to the edge of the neighborhood as possible. While this property is on an arterial, it's not an intersection or at the edge of a neighborhood. There's no change of conditions that would warrant a rezoning to CN. The 1.5 acres associated with this rezoning request was rezoned. It was partially CA and A to RA last year. The subject property is adjacent to CN zoning to the west. There is a child daycare center at Copeland Drive and High School Road, but the other CA uses here remain vacant or are single-family homes. Any questions?
Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 50. Sorry, 51.
So this is also a rezoning and planment request. The rezoning is for approximately 6.5 acres from open space to general commercial. And the plan amendment request is for 9.211 acres from suburban residential to corridor mixed use. This is the south side of Oak Ridge Highway, east of Byington-Solway Road. So the recommendation is to approve both the rezoning and plan amendment to the no-fill line. We're going to revise the staff report to approve the rezoning and plan amendment for the entire portion of the area. So the recommendation was based on no structures are allowed in the no-fill line. And since the recommendation was to prohibit any structures, the no-fill line already does that. It does allow vehicles that are operable to be parked in the floodplain. So we're going to recommend approval of the entire boundary so the property owners can use that use. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Warner. Okay, now we're going to move on to agenda items number 16 and 18. Ms. Boskett.
This is a request to rezone from RN1 Single Family Residential Neighborhood and Hillside Protection Overlay to RN2 Single Family Residential Neighborhood and Hillside Protection Overlay for a 0.67 acre property located on the north side of Vance Road, east of Lee Road. The subject property is designated low-density residential in the city's one-year plan, which allows consideration of the RN2 district. The RN2 district is intended to accommodate low-density, single-family residential development on relatively smaller lots with smaller setbacks. Though it's typically compatible with areas that are less dense, development around the subject property consists of lots that are ranging from 8,000 square feet to over half an acre in size. The uses permitted in the existing RN1 district are the same as the proposed RN2 district. The biggest difference between the two districts is that the RN2 district would reduce the minimum lot size for a single-family home from 10,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. Based on minimum lot area alone, the subject property could yield 6 houses in the RN2 district. The proposed rezoning does not support the general plan's development policy 9.3 to ensure that the context of new development, including scale, compatibility, does not impact existing neighborhoods and communities. The subject property is located in the middle of a residential block consisting solely of the RN1 zoning district. The lot sizes permitted by the RN2 district could lead to development that is out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. Because of these reasons, staff is recommending denial of the RN2 district. The hillside protection overlay would be retained. Are there any questions?
I have a question, but it comes up in this case, but it came up in several already. And this is about the form. It's at the very last page of almost all of the case files where it asks the applicant if they have engaged the public, have not engaged the public, haven't engaged the public, but plan to before the Planning Commission meeting. And there are several that just have no answer at all. And I wondered why that is the case.
We do not have any requirement in our rules or in your bylaws that the applicant must engage. The reason that we added it to that form is because it comes up on a fairly regular basis in these meetings. The question that you all have is, have you engaged the community? So we wanted to make sure that we put that on the front end when they were actually submitting their application to get them thinking about that. So it's not a requirement. So you will see a mixed response.
I know it's not a requirement. I'm clear on that. I guess I wondered why, since it's on the form, which I'm all for, and there is a box to check for all scenarios.
Why we aren't requiring them to check a
Yes.
box? That's a good question. It's a relatively new addition to our forms. It's something that we can follow up with applicants, but I'll say it's sometimes fairly difficult to get them to come back and
Yeah.
on the backside to do that.
It seems like since it's there, and I looked at it and thought, well, it does cover every scenario. It gives the person who's applying an option for all scenarios. It seems like they should fill it out, because when it's left blank, it doesn't help very much.
That's correct. I agree. And I think we can make the assumption that they're not engaging them if they haven't actually checked anything.
That's the assumption it leaves, which, may or may not be the right one. And it'd be great if you just knew they answered.
Yeah, and it's also a question to ask them when they come before the body as well. So.
I will say, just to piggyback off of that, we are planning on making it part of the application, like a third page, so that to make it easier to get that information from the applicant instead of after they've applied, sending them the form. So hopefully that'll increase the number of those that you'll see.
We can add that to our administrative rules, but in order to make it a requirement, I mean, we can say, please check the box one way or the other, but we have no enforcement. We can't refuse to take in their application if they don't check the box. But if we were to add it to, I feel like I would feel more comfortable if we were to add it to our administrative rules as part of that application process. But that's something that we can look into.
I'll ask Ms. Blakeney this too, but I think we need to be careful not to prejudice ourselves, if they say no, if they didn't.
Yeah, it's long been encouraged, and it frequently comes up in the meetings, which is the origin for it being included in the application process so that no applicant can later say, I didn't realize that was something I was going to be asked about. But as Director Brooks said, we can't require it. It certainly is something that I've heard this body many times say perhaps more discussion would have been able to alleviate some of the concerns that the community members are now expressing, and those could have and perhaps should have been addressed earlier. But, and I think that Ms. Porche's comment about changing the way that that's going to be handled and to be earlier in part of the application materials will help get a more clear answer.
If I could comment on that too, our firm has done a few applications since this packet or this sheet came out. And we always do try to engage when applicable, but sometimes there's situations where, we don't know of an established neighborhood that we can reach out, and we don't know of ways to contact people around, or maybe there's no one else on the block, or, in that area that lives around there. So there can be, I think, situations where people may not intend to reach out because they don't know who they can, or, if they can't even get in contact with anyone. So
I completely understand those scenarios where you don't know, is there a neighborhood association? Maybe there's not, or maybe they're not humans on that street. Reading the case file, that it would be great to know that, like checking the box that says, nope, no contacts available or something, just to know like there's been some kind of thought there since we have it. And that may be helpful for what Ms. Porche is putting together. Yeah.
I don't know if maybe there could be like a note section of that so that the applicant could comment on the unique situation. That might be helpful too.
Yes, and we can try to add a field. It's been challenging to fit everything on that one form. That's what our staff will tell us. But when they're filling that out, it's usually pretty early in the process. So they might not even know yet. They might not know what the challenges of contacting somebody might be in close proximity. And that's something that we can ask the applicant to follow up with.
I think I would like to ask the question to just, why would we want to know that? I mean, I understand we want to encourage and prompt them, but in reading the report, why would we want to know that? Because I think it's an immaterial matter. It shouldn't change our minds either way because they're not required.
But I'd like to see how it might be in a form that would encourage them. Like the verbiage that said is encouraged.
So just to save you the question at the meeting, to say, have you reached out to the community?
I
That's,
just think that, they don't know what they don't know.
yeah.
And I think that's pretty much the way people are, is they don't know that that's what a lot of people, I mean, if you're a pro at it, but, a lot of people come up here, they don't even know that it would have been a lot easier for them if they took a step more and talked to the neighborhood that was going to oppose them. I'm not dug in on it, I'm just trying to
Yeah, I don't know, I'm sensitive to the fact that I just want to make sure we're not looking at that as an item to say, well, that's a negative against them, and it shouldn't be a negative against them. Yeah.
Just want to say one last thing on that item. Our staff does encourage applicants to reach out, especially when we start to, sometimes comments don't come in till the very last minute, but I think that our staff have a pretty good read on whether or not something is going to be controversial or not, and so they are speaking to the applicants throughout the process, and that's something that is shared with them. And if they need contacts, like the city, there's a lot more organizations they're more organized. It's easier to get to them than in the county, but the county is getting better about that. So we do try to connect applicants with appropriate community members that can help them reach out. So we try to be as proactive as possible, and this was this request was added, I believe, by a county commissioner as well. So. Kelsey, do you want to keep going? I've lost track of which one we're on now. 18 is wrapped up, so we're on 18.
This is a request to rezone from RN4 General Residential Neighborhood to RN5 General Residential Neighborhood on a property located on the west side of Milton Street, north of Ludlow Avenue. The subject property is designated medium-density residential and office in the one-year plan, which allows consideration of the RN5 district. The RN5 district is intended to accommodate medium-density residential neighborhoods with a mix of single-family, two-family, townhouse, and multifamily dwellings. The RN5 district may also serve as a functional transition between traditionally single-family and two-family residential neighborhoods and more intensely developed residential or commercial areas. The property is near North Broadway, a commercial corridor to the east of the subject property, but it is separated from a railroad right-of-way isolating Milton Street from the commercial development. Similarly, Milton Street is separated from the single-family residential neighborhoods to the south, which are part of the infill housing overlay district. Those lots range in size from 5,000 to 7,000 square feet and align with their RN2 zoning. The property does not meet the intent of the RN5 district as it is in an isolated area devoid of medium-density development. It is not transitional despite the close proximity to North Broadway due to the railroad right-of-way and the electrical substation occupying several parcels. The main difference between the RN5 and RN4 districts is the intensity of the multifamily and townhouse developments allowed by right. The RN4 district requires special use approval for multifamily and townhouse developments with 9 or more units, whereas the RN5 district does not require special use approval for residential developments regardless of intensity. The special use process allows the Planning Commission to review the developments for compatibility and recommend conditions, which in this case could be appropriate due to the proximity of the railway and the surrounding electrical substations. The proposed rezoning does not comply with the General Plan's Development Policy 9.3 to ensure the context of new development, including scale and compatibility, does not impact existing neighborhoods and communities. The allowable minimum lot sizes of the RN5 district and the more intensive uses permissible by right could lead to development that is not in scale with the residential neighborhood surrounding the property, which is mainly single-family homes on larger lots and small-scale multifamily developments. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Kelsey, did you talk to them about a special use? Were they not, where she is, were they not agreeable to doing a special use as opposed to rezoning?
We tried to look at all of the possibilities that could be allowed with the RN5 district, so we didn't discuss the potential plans going forward with the subject property.
So I assume they knew that they could do a special use as opposed to a rezone?
I am not sure if that's something that they were aware of.
I'll say, yeah, this particular applicant is pretty savvy, so yes, they are aware.
Okay, so they just wanted to avoid special use. And so, but with the special use, you would be able to oversee it, and planning staff would be able to oversee the development for approval?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, move on to 39. 19 is what I have on my list. 39.
Item 39. So this one is a request to rezone from planned residential up to 3 dwelling units an acre to planned residential up to 8 dwelling units an acre for a property located on the north side of Ball Camp Pike, west of Valley Grove Lane. Access to the subject property is from Ball Camp Pike, a major collector street with a 19-foot pavement width. The subject property is designated suburban residential in the comprehensive plan, which allows consideration of the PR zone with up to 8 dwelling units an acre. Since the early 2000s, the surrounding area has experienced a transition from the industrial and agricultural zones to PR zoning with densities ranging from 3 to 8 dwelling units an acre. This past September, the parcel abutting the subject property on the north side was rezoned from the A zone to the PR zone with up to 8 dwelling units an acre on the condition that the property has viable access to Shawd Road. That parcel has frontage along Shawd Road, while the subject property only has access off of Ball Camp Pike. The proposed density of 8 dwelling units an acre could yield up to 40 lots. This density is inconsistent with the development along the 1.5-mile section of Ball Camp Pike between Bakertown Road and Amherst Road. Subdivisions accessed directly off of Ball Camp Pike are zoned PR with densities ranging from 3 to 4 dwelling units an acre. Those subdivisions with higher densities, while near the subject property, are accessed off of Shawd Road. The proposed rezoning does not comply with the Comprehensive Plan's Implementation Policy 9.3 to focus growth in areas already served by adequate infrastructure. The Knox County Engineering and Public Works Department has expressed concerns about a significant development along this section of Ball Camp Pike, and roadway improvements would likely be required. The subject property is also 415 east of an elevated railroad crossing, which may restrict visibility for drivers exiting the property. Knox County does not have a capital improvement project planned for this section of Ball Camp Pike in the foreseeable future. Because of these reasons, staff is recommending denial of the PR zone with up to 8 dwelling units an acre. Are there any questions?
Thank you. So I'm going to add an item before we turn it over to Mr. Reynolds. Ms. Hillman's going to take this one. It's agenda item number 52. It's a comprehensive plan amendment and a rezoning request by Sandra LLC. It's on Chapman Highway.
This request is to rezone a 6.3-acre parcel from low-density residential to agricultural with a traditional neighborhood place type, to rezone that to CA general business and the corridor mixed-use place type. This property is accessed by a 0.2-mile-long driveway from Chapman Highway, and it's surrounded on all sides by the traditional neighborhood place type. Staff are recommending denial of this rezoning and plan amendment because it is inconsistent with surrounding conditions, the intent of the zone, and policies of the comprehensive plan. With regards to changing conditions, approximately 100 acres surrounding the subject property was recently rezoned to planned residential with a density of 3 dwelling units per acre. This zoning change lays the groundwork for a future unified residential development around the subject property. At the same time, 19 acres to the southeast, which is not connected to the subject parcel, was rezoned to CA. This followed another recent case across Chapman Highway where 15 acres were rezoned to CA general business. Neither of these large properties have been developed yet, so there is ample underutilized commercial zoning that exists in a more appropriate location along the corridor. Additionally, this property is accessed via a narrow driveway that goes through and behind a single-family residential property. These infrastructure conditions do not support a more intensive rezoning and place type. Happy to answer any questions.
Let's keep going. Thank you, Jesse. All right, we'll turn over to Mr. Reynolds. We'll start off with agenda item 60.
Yes, thank you. This is Pickens Gap subdivision on Pickens Gap Road down in South Knox County area, really close to the Blount County border. It's 169 detached houses, with 161 of them being in the primary, the smaller lot subdivision. There are also 8 large estate lots, including the existing house lot. Property was rezoned from RB and agricultural to PR up to 4 dwelling units per acre in June 2024. There is a couple of conditions, one of them being a non-disturbance area 35 feet from the north property line, so that includes no grading. And then also within that 35-foot buffer, a type B landscape screen has to be installed where no existing vegetation exists. That landscape plan will come forward during the permitting stage. We'll verify that the existing landscaping or the existing vegetation and the proposed landscaping meets the requirements of the type B landscape screen. There's 14 conditions of the concept plan approval. One of them, a couple of the ones to note are widening Pickens Gap Road from the entrance up to the Tarkland Valley Road intersection, just off the screen here. The other is that there be a right out only on Pickens Gap Road. Pickens Gap itself is less than 18 feet wide in many locations along their frontage, but going to the south into Blount County, it gets much more narrow. So we want to make people go north as much as possible because they're really not gaining much by going south on this road. There are ample opportunities to get back over Chapman Highway going to the north. Again, so this is a location map, but you can see going to the south, you go almost directly into Blount County, and Seymour is just off to the east. Highland View Drive is a collector road that can take you over to Chapman Highway. Then continuing on up Pickens Gap to Tipton Station, so on you get back up to Governor John Sevier. Existing land uses in the area predominantly smaller lot, residential, I say smaller, but probably a half acre or more residential, rural residential, and a lot of agricultural forestry vacant. This is in the rural area in the growth policy plan. The planned growth area actually expanded into this area under the, compared to the previous growth policy plan. There is some RB. This property was zoned RB. It's not built for RB purposes. It is like RB zoning allows pretty much everything, multifamily, townhouses, single family. These are all built out as single family use houses. In the future land use map recommends rural living, and it does have a small portion of rural conservation, which is in a steep part of the hillside area. I'm not going to go through this too much. We've gone through many of these before, but the rural place type does recommend single-family houses as a primary use. Recommends 1 to 2 story houses. This project does fit generally within the rural living place type. Hillside protection plan. You can see that a good portion of the southeast part of the property is a ridge line. It does have a smaller ridge line through the property on the northeast side. Most of the subdivision stays outside of the steepest slopes, so kind of in this little gap between the 2 ridges. Some of the 15, up to 25% slopes will be disturbed. But for the most part, the steepest slopes are in the estate lots, and they do outline maximum disturbance allowed within the estate lots going forward. So just so you know, disturbance within the subdivision, so the smaller lots and roads, is about 6 acres. The disturbance allocated for the estate lots is 15 acres. Majority of that is each of these lots along this ridge will allow 1.75 acres of disturbance. And then the larger lot for this ridge is about 4 acres, 4.5 acres. Basically what they did was looked at how much disturbance they thought it would take to get driveway infrastructure, like water lines and electricity, that kind of thing in the house lot, and then which was about 30% of the larger or the smaller estate lots and then applied the same number to the larger lot. That's why this one happened to be 4 acres. So overall, they're requesting about 21 acres of disturbance versus the hillside protection, which is about 16 acres. So I think they're probably not going to get anywhere near that on this larger lot, regardless. And this is just kind of outlining the areas that they are disturbing in the subdivision on the edges. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong project. Pickens Gap, just real quick, it is striped, but it is narrower than the 18 feet typical. And they are requesting 2 alternative design standards that require planning commission approval, which are reductions of horizontal curves here and here. We are supportive of those. There will be site distance easements to the corners, but they have open spaces, and there's a intersection grade alternative design standard, which is provable by the Engineering and Public Works Department. Again, supportive of that request. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, seeing no questions, let's move on to number 63.
Okay, so this is a modification to a previous approval back in June of this year. They are requesting modification of the turnarounds at the end of road. This happens to be Road B, I'm pointing out, and Road A on the east side. Originally, the Planning Commission required temporary cul-de-sac turnarounds because these are stub roads. They do have stub outs, right-of-way stub outs that go to the properties to the north. So they're requesting a T turnaround style instead of the cul-de-sac. In addition to the turnarounds, they're requesting a 15-foot peripheral setback on this north property line, a new retention pond in this area on the south side of the property. And just to point out a couple other minor changes, the previous concept plan condition of approval was to move these detention ponds along Ebenezer further away from Ebenezer Road, so they're just showing that. And then there's an access driveway to the adjacent property, which is really only for emergency vehicles. This is not, it's shown on the plan. It really isn't part of the concept. So, but it is pointed out because they are showing it on the plan just to explain what that is. We are recommending approval of most of it, subject to 3 conditions. And really, we're approving that part of the 3 conditions is to approve it upon the original concept plan conditions and changing one of them to allow a T turnaround on Road B, but denying the T turnaround at the end of Road A. So staff, in June, we recommended that both these turnarounds should be cul-de-sacs because of the unknown of the property to the north, whether it would ever be redeveloped, if it was never redeveloped, or if they used alternative access. We really need the cul-de-sacs versus the T turnarounds. Since then, these 2 properties have been rezoned to planned residential with a condition that once they redevelop, they cannot access Grosse Pointe Drive over to the east, which really limits them to accessing this property at Road B. This property is, I can't remember if it's on County Commission tonight maybe, but it's going through rezoning. It's being split, so about here. The east side will be PR, the west side will be OB, assuming if it hasn't not been approved yet, I'm not positive. So Road B will, again, it'll have the same, access restrictions, so Road B will be the only access point for it. Road A, the part that staff has concern with is that it still goes into the RAE zone property, which may or may not ever be redeveloped, and currently has no restriction from accessing Grosse Pointe. So there's less certainty whether that stub out will ever be used. So we're recommending denial of the T turnaround on that street, keeping the cul-de-sac temporary turnaround. And if it does get used, they can still remove the cul-de-sac. And turn into a standard road cross-section, but for the time being, we want it as a cul-de-sac.
Mike, why does it matter if it's a T versus a cul-de-sac? I mean,
I'd say part of it is usability. I don't know, Jim, if you have any thoughts on it, but a lot of it has usability. So the subdivision regulations only allow one type of turnaround for a public road, which is a cul-de-sac. For the private road, there's more options. So anytime you want to use something different than a cul-de-sac on a private road or on a public road, it has to be a variance. And in this case, because there's not really a change of conditions to the north, we just don't see justification for that. But if you think about how a cul-de-sac is used versus a T turnaround, I mean, you have to do a multi-point turn, so it's a lot harder to use. So over long term, it's not the most ideal situation, especially on a longer road like Road A. If I go back to the plan here, I mean, Road A is the main road coming in. There's more houses on it versus Road B. So that turnaround will probably see more action than the other one, or more use.
thank you.
Yeah, and for emergency responders as well, it's usually a better design. Because with these two, as shown, the T turnarounds will have to be bigger than as shown. They're more, as shown, more for passenger vehicles than, say, like a fire engine. So even the one on Road B will have to get bigger.
Commissioner Adams?
This is thought of because of what Mike was saying with the subdivision regulations. Those will be considered as part of the UDO. Yes?
Yes, that's correct. Commissioner Midas, did you have other questions? No. Okay, we'll move on to, are you ready to move on to 69, Mike, or did you have?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. We'll briefly talk about agenda item number 69.
Okay. So if you're not familiar with the history on this, the property has gone through some starts and stops. It eventually was rezoned to the employment center zoning, the EC zone, to allow for a business park to be constructed by the Industrial Development Board. The employment center zoning requires design guidelines to be built or to be adopted by the Planning Commission, obviously developed by the applicant. And so what they're requesting is to modify those development guidelines. So in 2015, it was rezoned. There were conditions, and I'll go through those conditions in a second. And then in 2016, the development or design guidelines were approved. We are recommending approval of this, but I'm just going to give a real quick, just kind of jump to the original layout to give you an idea what was happening. So this is Thorn Grove Pike. This is Midway, the Midway intersection off of I-40. And then, so they have kind of two pieces. They have this piece off to the northeast. Actually, in this piece, they kind of talked about it being a potential mixed-use area, and then the main body of the industrial park here. And they've already built this road, and then this is shown on the parcel map, but it's not built out yet. So it was always intended to have multiple users. You know, there'd be a lot of different businesses. These would be public roads, and because they were going to have different businesses, they needed to look at the design guidelines a little differently. You know, how is each development going to impact the adjacent development? Now it's all under one owner, or it will be under one owner and one developer. So, and they want to privatize the internal streets. So it's going to be a large campus. So they're not going to, in the internal parts of the guidelines that would more impact the adjacent users really isn't there. It's we're more concerned about how is this going to still impact the outside, property owners. So, so a lot of the adjustments that you're seeing have to do with the fact they have one campus developer versus multiple users on the interior of the park. So some of the conditions, well, these were the conditions of the rezoning, commercial and retail inside the business park. So I just kind of highlighted the two that were probably the most important or applicable going forward. Consideration for an agricultural business, farmer's market location, a big room for the community, parks, trails, and other nature on the unbuildable area. This doesn't, I guess the changes to the guidelines don't necessarily impact those elements of the proposal. They're really more about landscape screening, building elements, those types of things. So I say that what we're talking about is not necessarily going to be impacted by this. This is the existing condition, Thorn Grove Pike. They've already built the roundabout. And as I said, the one new internal road is already built. Right now it's public. Their intent is to go private with that. There's a lot of little revisions in the guidelines, so I don't know if I want to go over each one of them. As you can see, some of them are just benign things like changing Midway design guidelines to Green Heck Group Tennessee campus design guidelines, and changing other references to like the Development Corp and so on. If you have anything that you see that you have questions about going in this, I can always respond to them now or before the Planning Commission meeting, because getting into each one of these now is probably going to be a little tough. But I can definitely have answers one way or the other if you have questions. So, and
Thank you, Mike.
I highlighted one here just because it deals with external users. It talks about screening like rooftop elements. They should make reasonable efforts to coordinate landscape screening with adjacent property owners as an alternative to rooftop screening for mechanical equipment. So this was kind of an example where they're, the original guidelines were a little strict on how you apply this. We'll still, as a staff, planning staff will still see all these plans and still apply these guidelines before they get permitted. So in this case, they're asking for a little bit of flexibility on how they handle some of those screening on the rooftops. So that's just kind of an example of how they've modified or requesting to revise the guidelines.
Anybody have any questions?
I know there was a lot of community input that was received before Planning Commission approved the original recommendation. Have they reached out to the community? I mean, it looked like there wasn't any public comments on there.
Yeah.
I believe that they have been reaching out to the community. This has been a very public project. There's been large announcements about this company coming. Jim, you were shaking your head. I don't know if you've been part of any of those conversations, but I know that the company itself, as well as the Knoxville Chamber, have been reaching out and talking to adjacent landowners.
That's correct, Amy. The chambers had some lunch, actually working sessions with the community group. So I actually spoke to one of those folks last week, and he was very pleased with the outreach that had occurred.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to, so we have a little bit of time, if it's okay. I just want to touch on one item that you don't see often on your agenda. It is agenda item number 29. Our agenda is very long. This is one of the longest agendas that we've seen in a while. So just encourage you all, if you can and have time, to take a look at that particular item in advance. It is one of the plan developments. It's an optional concept plan, and the applicant will be asking for specific feedback from you all. So there's no votes taken. Staff does not have a specific recommendation on this yet. It is just something that the applicant is allowed to do. It's similar to, if you all are familiar with the Design Review Board, oftentimes applicants will come before that board, present their ideas, and get initial feedback before they finalize that plan and bring it forward for a vote. So that is the purpose of that particular item. Yes, that's correct. Are there any other items that we didn't touch on that you all wanted to talk about?
We're adjourned.
Okay.